First of all, let me just say how honored I am to meet you, given all that you've been through, given the fact that I feel, and you probably get this a lot, that I feel like I know a lot about you, and yet I don't really know you. Do you get that a lot?
I do. I get a lot of people who feel that, they've come to know me through the documentary, through a lot of the things that have gone out there. So, yeah, I'm used to that.
So let me just sort of get the sense of where you are right now. I mean, you've been out for a couple of months. How have you been adjusting to life outside of prison?
I mean, it's been good, I think it's made all the difference because I've had such a strong support system, and my husband, my family, our friends. I just have an entire community of people that have just been, just there to support me. And it's just been really easy. I really wish that it was like that for other people getting out of prison, because it's made all the difference in my transition.
You realize that it isn't that
Oh, yeah.
easy for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Even so the women where I was in the transition center, a lot of them didn't know where they were going to go as far as housing. And some of their options were always going back to the same situations where they came from. And if you're really trying to change, you don't want to do that, And if you want to go to try to start over in a nice neighborhood or somewhere like that, it's like you can't even get in. You can't pass the background check. They won't let you move in there. And so it can be really difficult when you have a criminal record. People don't necessarily want to give you a chance.
That's part of we're having a discussion now about the criminal justice system in this country, but that's also another component of it. Someone is released from prison and getting back on your feet can be challenging.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I'm really blessed, and it shouldn't be that way. I think there's so much more that can be done. I think that our governments have enough resources at the federal level, at the state levels. There's several organizations, that do their part, that are willing to step up, and I think it's really a matter of determining how we can best allocate the resources that are available.
And what are the conditions of your parole, and how have you managed that?
Parole has been easy. I was blessed, that Governor Haslam, he didn't get outrageous with the stipulations. So I'm supervised by the Board of Parole in Tennessee, but I have different stipulations that I have to follow under the clemency. So I have to do community service, which, that's where my heart is anyway. So that's not really doing any work. And of course I have to stay employed, which that's, again, I'm doing what I love to do. So it's not just extraordinary. There are some things that come with parole that are just, it's a hardship, having to drive all the way to the office to get permits or paperwork and things like that. But I keep reminding myself just how many people would love to be in this position, so I do it, and I do it gladly. You
say community service is what's in your soul.
Yeah.
Tell me about what's in your soul when it comes to community service.
So just the girls, that I get to mentor through my local organization. It's not my organization, but it's an organization that I work with. It's called Epic Girl. I get to go in and mentor. It's a fabulous organization. They work with girls who've gone through the juvenile court. Some of them are currently housed in state facilities. They actually go into high schools to talk with girls before they even get to that point. And they let me come along and talk to the girls about my story. We discuss healthy relationships, boundaries, and just really develop a relationship with those girls and let them know that there's someone there for them.
If you had met someone like you when you were 14 or 15, how do you think you would have reacted to encountering someone with your story?
I think it would have made all the difference. There were so many things that I was dealing with that I didn't really understand how to navigate. I wanted to make these decisions for myself, but I wasn't equipped. I definitely was in over my head. So I think if I had met someone who had been through those situations and who could tell me how they got through it, how I could avoid some of the same mistakes they made, that I could see myself in that person, I think it would have made a big difference. I know it would have made a big difference.
So then how has your life changed in the 15 years that you were incarcerated? When you went in, describe to me how you felt and the kinds of thoughts that you had then and where you are today.
So when I went in, I struggled with anger, I struggled with shame. I blamed myself for a lot of the situations that I was in, and I was really harsh on myself. And, you know, it was a process of learning to forgive myself, to understand that every situation that I was placed in, you know, it wasn't like I was just willingly making these decisions. I was a child. There were adults who were around who were exploiting, who were taking advantage, who were manipulating, and I don't have to take ownership of that. That's something that I did to myself. And then I dealt with a lot of shame because I had so many shortcomings, and I mean, that's okay too. You know, everybody has fallen short, and I just had to learn to love myself. I had to learn to think about all of the unhealthy thought processes that I had taken as truth, all the lies that I had taken in, and just replacing them and understanding that I don't have to live my life trying to be accepted by another person. God accepts me just the way I am. And if I live to please Him, then I'm good.
So you mentioned in the documentary, right after your sentencing, I thought it was just so profound. You said, just after you'd been sentenced to life in prison, you said you're fighting for your freedom, but you're also fighting to maintain your sanity. How were you able to maintain your sanity all these years?
Well, you know, there were definitely times that it was a struggle, but there was something telling me that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life in prison. Over the years, I've come to know that that was the voice of God letting me know. I didn't realize it at first, and it just kept pushing me that, you know, I had to go on. There was times I was like, man, I can't keep doing this. Like, I'm tired. I'm just tired. But there's just something in you that knows, like, you don't have a choice. You have to go. Like, you can't just give up and just, like, lay down. Like, you have to keep going. You have to keep fighting. And, you know, God got me through it.
Would you say that you've always been a fighter?
I would say that. Not always in a positive way.
Right. Well, so then that sort of leads to my next question, which is, when did you come to realize that the circumstances that you found yourself in, that you were in fact a victim? When did that realization come to you?
You know, that actually took many, many years. I was in my late 20s when I actually realized that I was a trafficking victim. For so long, you know, I had thought, no, they said that I was a teenage prostitute. I knew what I was doing. You know, of course, like, I let them manipulate me into doing this. I thought I was doing something for someone I figured was my boyfriend, and that wasn't necessarily the truth, but it's not like, you know, he was like, you're gonna do this or I'm gonna kill you. I mean, he made some threats, but I really, you know, dealt with that blaming myself, like, no, I did that. And it was in slavery, a group in Tennessee who works with human trafficking victims. They work with the government on different operations to combat trafficking. They ran a campaign called What is 13? And in that campaign, they stressed that there's no such thing as a teenage prostitute.
When you heard that, what'd you think?
I was like, well, yeah, there is. You know?
Because you thought to yourself, I was one.
Right. And the more I started to look into it, the more I started to research. And that was when I was like, okay, well, you know, what happened to me is not okay. Like, something actually happened to me. And I just wanted to find out why. Why was I so vulnerable? You know, there's a certain element where you're just vulnerable because you're young, because you're a child. Your minds are just naturally impressionable in that way. But it was like, why was it just so easy for this man to come along, and in the space of a few weeks, I was doing these things. And it was a process, you know. I had dealt with a lot of the trauma from the violence that was done to me and everything, but that part of it, that shame, that blaming myself, I hadn't dealt with until I was an adult when I realized that I was a victim of trafficking.
There's a moment in your book where you describe this character that was close to your family, a character named Big John, and you describe the moment that he looked at you when you were still just a child, and you had started to fill out, and you say that you could feel shame, and you could hear your mom looking at you and getting worried about older men checking you out. Right. Describe that for me.
So, my mom, like back in the day, like Lifetime stayed on the television. There was all these movies, I think, what was the one? It was like the coach was molesting the gymnast. And
sounds like a Lifetime movie.
Right. And she would have me sit with her and watch these movies, and then like during the commercials, she'd question me and like make sure I understood that these things weren't okay. And, so I knew like if someone ever approached me in that way that I was supposed to sound the alarm. And so whenever he made me feel that way, that's what I did. And I didn't necessarily get the response that I had expected from the people that I was with. My mother was upset, but she wasn't with me at that time. So it just kind of was like, well, that's not how that happened in the movie. Right. So.
And did you start to realize that? Did you begin to feel as almost all of your interactions, specifically with adult men, with older men, had to do with them wanting something from you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that was part of the understanding that no, it wasn't, like this wasn't two consensual adults. Like I was a child. I was 14, 15, 16 years old, and these men were 30, 30 some odd years, 28 years old. Like they knew what they were doing, and it wasn't a consensual relationship, period.
There are several moments in the documentary that are just sort of heartbreaking when you're watching it for the first time. And the one that probably affected me the most is you're looking at a list of men that you've had sex with, and you're just rattling it off as if it was a grocery list. Yeah. And I wondered, even at that age, was that a method by which you sort of disengaged from the act?
There was a real disconnect, like it's like these things weren't things that I was doing, they were things that happened to me, And so it just like, it was easy to talk about it like that. Like, okay, yeah, that happened, and then that happened. Like, I walked down the street, I went to the store, and got a pack of bubble gum. I hadn't really processed it yet, So that was part of me beginning to process it. I know at that time there was so much going on. I was facing trial, didn't know what was going to happen with that, and then I was still trying to recover and understand a lot of the things that had led up to that. So I was in a situation I really didn't know how to weed my way out of it, and that was just me trying to make sense of it, trying to start somewhere. Based on some of the questions that people have been asking me. But yeah, that was difficult.
I want to just touch upon briefly, there's another victim, and that's Johnny Allen. His family released a statement after your clemency, in the wake of your clemency. I'm going to read part of it. They wrote, "Our hearts are broken because we feel like Johnny never got to defend himself. We never got to be a voice for him." What's your reaction to them and to that statement?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially in the justice system, it's such an adversarial process that many times both the defendants and the victims' voices are left out of it. You have the state that's just preparing a case and you're trying to defend yourself against it. So I think there are many things that are left unsaid, many things that people would like to say. And if they would ever want to have a conversation, then I'm open to that. But so far, I haven't received any kind of word that they would be open to that. That would definitely be a decision that they would have to make. But I would absolutely talk with them if they'd like.
You would talk to Johnny Allen's family?
I would.
Do you feel that he's a victim as well? Is that your understanding of how they feel about the situation?
I completely understand how they feel. Like this was somebody's son. It was someone's brother. You know, I completely understand. I don't think it matters when you think about circumstances. If you lose someone, you lose someone. Like grief doesn't care about what the situation was. And so I think we have to have respect for that. Like that's their grief. We can't tell them how they're supposed to process it.
And there will be some, and you probably have heard this, that will say, look, you've not been exonerated, you've been given clemency. What do you want them to know about you, about your life, from the moment that you shot and killed Johnny Allen to where you are today? Yes,
I've made mistakes. I've done something that, completely destroyed a family. And it damaged multiple people in the process, my own family as well. They've suffered as well. And we've all done things that we can regret, obviously some worse than others. But the point is that there is redemption. There is possibility that God can change you if you open your heart to allow him to. And I'm thankful that he did that with me. And it's available for anybody. I don't think anybody is beyond repair. I don't think anybody they just need to be thrown away. Like, I think that as people, we're so much more complex than just being limited to our mistakes and the bad decisions that we make.
You just mentioned about being thrown away, and in your book you write this: by the end of the trial, I felt I was basically Satan's seed. The only question was whether I would be fixed or whether there was nothing left for me but to be thrown away in prison.
Yeah.
Satan's seed.
Oh yeah, like, I can't even explain to you, like, the feeling when you're sitting in that courtroom and you have someone that beyond doing their job, they're just coming at you like you are the most despicable person they've ever met. And that's how I felt with the prosecutor in my case. And everything, like witness after witness is saying all these things, and everything is being interpreted in the worst possible light. And you're sitting there and you're screaming like, that's not what happened, and no, that's not what that is, and you're reading that all wrong, but you can't even say anything. Like, you just have to kind of just take it. And I mean, it's traumatic just sitting in the courtroom and hearing all that stuff. And it's difficult, and it's not great for your self-esteem whatsoever. So that is how I felt. I felt very low during that time.
And it's remarkable because you can't tell, because as you say, you're just sitting there, and anybody looking at you, I guess, even if the jury is looking at you, they just see you sort of staring blankly ahead. But what was going through your mind as you're listening to this? You write here that you were basically Satan's seed, and I can't imagine how a child could think that about themselves.
Yeah, it's just a feeling of defeat. Like, I just felt so defeated, and like, I can't even, in the book you see just how it felt, and being in the cell by myself. I was on solitary confinement, and so just really had time to just ruminate on everything that was said. And it wasn't just in the courtroom, it was on the media at that time. It was just horrible. And people around me in the jails, it was just really difficult.
And you still found it within you to comfort your mother after you were sentenced, like an adult, telling her mom, don't get upset, I don't want you to have a stroke, I don't want you to mess up at work. Where did that come from?
One of my biggest regrets is the way that I'd hurt my mother. She tried so hard. She tried everything that she knew to try. She even asked, the professionals that had come into contact with me, the schools that had come into contact with me, what she could do. So just seeing the way that I had hurt her so much, I didn't want to hurt her anymore. And when you're doing time, your family does that time with you. And a lot of people don't see that. But your family gets treated horribly by the jail staff, the prison staff. Your family has to rearrange their life because of your absence, because they have to be present for you. And it's just difficult, and so you want to shield them from as much as you can. I can remember like really struggling like financial wise during those early times, you know, because commissary is expensive. You know, you have to pay for your hygiene, and who wants to eat the prison food? But, you know, you don't want your family to keep coming out of their pockets. And so there was time I didn't know where my next bar of deodorant was coming from, but I didn't want to let her know that. And so there was always that protective instinct with everything.
You write a lot about her in the book. I mean, she's from the very first page, and you refer to your mother, Elinette, as mommy throughout the course of the book. And it's clear that you came from a loving home. Mm-hmm. And so anybody who's watching this or who knows your story is going to say, you know, how can somebody who had a mother and a family that cared and loved for her? There's that one moment that I'm reading where you go home and you're looking in the refrigerator for something to eat, and your mom says, have anything you want. She's just so happy that you're back home. Right. And you say to yourself that this is the moment that you can choose to stay here, stay with your mom, you know, honor your mom by being the kind of daughter that she would want you to be, and then yet you find yourself back in Nashville a couple of weeks later.
Yeah, and I still, like, when I had called her from the bus station, and, but just being able to hear, like, how I'd hurt her in that moment, I still carry that, and I carry that all these years, you know. And it's difficult because you think, if you have this good home that you come from, like, how can things like this happen? But we have to be more conscious of all of the influences, you know, on children. There's school, there's neighborhood, there's what you're seeing out in the media, out in the world. And there's so much more that has an influence on you than just your parents. And so she tried, but it was hard for her to fight the battles that were going on within me that I had taken on from other places around me. She tried, but.
What do you want the world to know about your mom, Elinette?
I want her to know them to know that, and her to know. My mother, Elinette, is an amazing woman. I'm so blessed that God put her in my life. She's incredible. You know, I really love her.
There's another section of the documentary where we are introduced to your biological mother. Mm-hmm. Did you know that she had abused alcohol and drugs up until you were practically born, and that her mother had also gone through some things in her life, abuse, so in other words, 3 generations of women had suffered? Were you aware of that at all?
That had all come out, it did, and that was one of the things that allowed me to have some compassion and come to a place of forgiveness for her. Even though we don't have a relationship, I have no desire to have a relationship with her. I just had to come to the point where I saw that you can forgive someone, and even though they continue to be unhealthy to themselves, you don't have to allow that in your own life. So I didn't know that, but I come to find that out, and, you know, I forgive her for that. I think she deserves compassion.
How do you find it in your heart to be so compassionate, to undertake this mission that you've now undertaken? Because there's a lot of people, Cyntoia, who would say, you know, yes, I did something that was horrific. I killed a man, but, you know, I also paid for it. And I just want to go and live my life away from it all. How do you find it in your heart to be compassionate?
So for me, it definitely comes through Jesus. And, you know, when I read how we should be treating other people the way we would like to be treated, and, you know, to take that a step further, I want to strive to see other people the way God sees me, because I know what it's done for me. I know how it's changed me. And so it's not always easy to look at people with compassion, but I definitely try. I definitely strive to do that, and, you know, it gives me peace.
The moment in the book where you describe that someone pointed out to you that T.I. and Rihanna and people are sharing your story, the compassion that you experienced from strangers, from people who didn't know you personally, describe for me how that felt when you became aware that there were so many people, beyond even just the celebrities and the activists, who were following your story and who are advocating on your behalf.
Right. It was so great. Like, if you could see all the letters that I had got, I was getting letters from France, from Africa, from people all across the planet telling me, I see you, I hear you, we're here for you. And it was like, wow, look at God, just the compassion that they showed. And it was just incredible, and it gave me hope that just as they saw me in that light, they can see other people in the system in that life. It gave me hope that there was something to be done about other people serving excessive sentences, other people who are currently experiencing injustice. It gave me hope for them just as it gave me hope for myself.
There are 182 people right now, other juveniles, sentenced to life in Tennessee alone. Why do you think your story touched that nerve?
Again, it's nobody but God. I think that sometimes, He calls individuals forth, to shed light on things. I definitely think He's using me as a vessel in order to shed light. And, that just every day I carry that with me. Every time I sit down to speak to someone, I think about not just those 182, but the women who weren't necessarily juveniles, the men in prisons. I think about all of them who don't have a voice. And, it's a blessing that God put me in this position, and I'm completely committed to taking every opportunity I can to try to voice that.
Does that include, I guess, the family of Johnny Allen? Do you think about them at all?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yeah, absolutely.
All those letters you're getting from Africa, from France, from people who are very, very famous, how does the love of your life, how does that letter make its way to your heart? Because you're getting a lot of fan mail.
Yeah.
And, then you found love.
Well, aside from the fact that he is very fine. He is.
That helps, right? We're in church now, so.
Yeah. It just really, really stuck out to me. The letter itself was unique from where he had burned the paper. But
Was it really?
It was. It really spoke to me in a way that I can't describe. I remember whenever I was packing up my things to send home, I had looked at that letter again, and I looked at the bottom of the page, and there was Free Cyntoia, #2017. And this was in January, before anybody ever thought of a hashtag. That happened in November 2017. And so I look back at the things that he said in that letter, which I wrote about it in the book, and it's like, wow, it was so prophetic, and no wonder it spoke to me. It was supposed to speak to me. And of course, that's how I knew that was my husband, so.
And what's it like finally being able to share a life together?
Oh, it's incredible. I really feel like I live with my best friend.
In the doc, you said this, that you were a rare and precious stone cast out to sea, that you never knew the depth and the strength of the power within you. How did that realization help you survive? And of that immense strength that it took you to get to this point here, how are you able to share some of that with others?
So whenever I did write that was when I was on solitary confinement, and so I was going through so much, such inner turmoil, and I really feel that, that was the voice of God telling me, there is something in you worth salvaging, and beyond something worth salvaging, there's something in you valuable, and you have to fight to unearth that, to bring that to the surface. And it just helped me in such a way. It was so affirming for me, especially after I had taken on that lie that I was worth nothing and that my life meant nothing. So that really helped me in deep ways, and I really know that was God telling me that, and He was calling something forth within me.
Just when I heard you say that in the documentary, I just thought of the image, the realization that you are a rare, precious stone, but that you've been cast out to sea, that you've been thrown away. just even at your age, to understand what that was. First of all, to understand that you are somebody important, but that also you've been tossed to the side.
And that's something that I had come to understand that from a very young age. Going through school, I felt like they just want to get rid of me. Anytime that I was having trouble in the classrooms, they just want to hide me. Whether it's an ISS, whether it's being suspended, whether it's being expelled, it's just more convenient to hide me. When it came time for me to go to court, and it was just easier than to call another parent, because I wrote about that, I won't go into detail, but instead of just calling someone else or having me wait, it was just stick her in state custody. It was just so easy to just toss me aside, my life didn't mean anything.
So when did you come to realize that you were in fact a precious stone?
It was that time when I was on solitary confinement and I was really dealing with stuff. So I was 18 at that time. It was after I was convicted. And I was really free of all the court pressures. And I really had time to start to process and really pick up the pieces. And so that was the time that I had come across that.
Last question, I guess. You mentioned some of those incidences where you had been tossed aside, where you had been forgotten. If you could just go back and share with those individuals what you knew was in your heart, what you knew was in your soul, that you weren't this person that everyone has painted as somebody who's a murderer or somebody who's a robber or somebody who's a prostitute, that you were the person that you are right now.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I would just tell them, what you meant for bad, God turned it around for my good. And I would just hope that you would consider that when you're dealing with other people.
And so what's the message for people that find themselves or that are in the situation that you're in right now? What do you want them to know if they're watching this or if they're coming into contact with you?
I want you to know that, there are people who see you, who hear you. You do have a voice. Even though there is a system that's trying to tell you that you don't have a voice, that you don't matter. There are people in society that tell you that you're not worth anything, that you're less than, or that your life means any less than theirs or someone else's. They can't place value on your life. They can't assign that to you. God loves you for who you are, how you are. And if you live for Him, then you'll never go wrong.
Can the system be reformed?
I think it can. I think it can. And I think that, it's going to take everyone. I think everyone has to understand that it affects every single person, whether you want to admit it or not. The justice system affects everyone in some way. Everybody is just one bad decision, one mistake, one accident from being caught up in the justice system. And so we all should be invested in making sure that is treating people the way they should be treated, the way that you would want to be treated.
Cyntoia Brown, thank you very much for spending some time with us. This was great.